Hey everybody, this is Dennis Nomzalski here, author of Disturbers Row. Just doing another video about a lot of the illustrations in the book. There's more than 90 of them, pen and ink drawings done by a guy by the name of Dan Florentino. He's a great artist. This is, of course, the cover, which you've seen in other videos. That's Bob, that's Dave, that's me, that's Rich, and that's Gary. We are the 5 Disturbers of room 204 at Our Lady of Grace grammar school in the city of Chicago. School year 1966 and 1967. So let's get on with these other illustrations. Okay, in the neighborhood there was a couple, older couple. They owned and operated a drugstore at a street called Avers and Fullerton. They lived upstairs, the storefront on the first floor, and then an apartment above it on the second floor. They lived there. Their names were, I call them in the book, the Vosses, Mr. and Mr. Voss. They ran this place. It was sort of a great place, if you will. Old-fashioned soda fountain with seats and stools. He sold those malted milk tablets, which were absolutely stunningly delicious. You put one in your mouth and you let it melt, and if you were lucky, a tin of those things might last you a couple of days at least. But the Mosses were very strange. Excuse me. They didn't seem to like people, certainly not kids. And so I always wondered, what are these people doing in the retail business? You know, every time you came in, if a group of kids came in, more than one, 2 or 3, Voss would get nervous. They always seemed, well, they were always nervous, kind of fidgeting a lot. But again, really didn't like kids. And so, we had a few stories going around. And of course, they were just goofy stories that kids tell, and that Voss had coffins in the basement, and if you went in there by yourself, he would snatch you, take you down to the basement, and put you in a coffin, and blah blah blah. So there's a good story in the book about a bunch of kids honestly tormenting Mr. Voss, but it was again kind of weird because they didn't seem to like people. And it's just always a fascinating thing to me as to what the hell is this guy doing in the retail business where he's got to deal with members of the public. This is a great one. So, and this is kids in their imaginations and stuff like this. There was a guy, I believe, in the neighborhood we called Harry Scary. At least me and my buddy Jim Massiola believed there was a guy named Harry Scary. And we knew where he lived. He lived on a street called Avers. We had never seen Harry Scary, but Harry was supposed to be really scary, and he was supposed to kidnap and torture kids in his basement. Just a mean guy, right? But there's a story about how we go up to Harry's front porch and sort of torment him and ring his doorbell and blah, blah, blah. And you can read that in the book. But the thing is, this entire mythology had developed around this guy, at least in my mind, in the minds of some of the other kids. He was a crazed man. He looked like a skeleton, maybe a mummy. No one, we didn't really know. He kidnapped kids. He tortured kids. He probably ate them. But here's the thing. Me and Jim waited, sort of sat in the alley behind this guy's house one day, for about maybe 2 hours, who knows, just kind of waiting for him to come out. We wanted to see what this guy looked like, because guess what? We had never seen him. And my hunch is that 99% of the kids who told stories about this fellow had never seen him either. I mean, that's what I think. So this entire myth develops around this guy that he's a bad, evil guy, and no one has ever seen him. No one has ever talked to him. So there you go. That's what happens when kids let their imaginations go goofy. Kaz Park, or properly called Kosciuszko Park. We called it Kosciuszko Park, the Americanized name of Kosciuszko, the people, Poles, the only people who knew how to properly pronounce it were like my mom and her sisters, and then the people who lived north of Diversity in a neighborhood called Avondale. They were, kind of hardcore Poles. A lot of them, recent immigrants and stuff like that. But Kosciuszko Park was a great place. It's kind of a center of the neighborhood where we all often went to play baseball, football, a game of pinner that we used to play, and I'll get into that in a later episode. But there were unwritten rules of the. Well, let me back up. Cos Park was basically, it was maintained by adults, the Chicago Park District employees, but it was a place for and really about kids. And that was the beauty of it. Again, remember, as I've said before, back then, this is 50s and 60s, we go out and play by ourselves, amongst ourselves, hours on end, not a single adult around. We didn't want them around. They didn't want to be around. The one thing that the adults told us they always said, like on a summer morning or something, and they'd see you still in the house, like it's 10 o'clock in the morning, they'd see you still in the house, and your dad or mom would go, "What you doing in the house? Go out and get some fresh air." So anyway, Cos was a wonderful place. It's about 9 acres, right there, plopped down in the middle of this residential and industrial area. But there were unwritten rules, and the unwritten rules were that when you played baseball or softball, I had 4 baseball diamonds there, but the idea is that the big kids got to call dibs. We did that, called dibs on things. I called dibs on that. I called dibs on this. We called dibs on the field. That means we have basically reserved the field. And the older guys always had the right to call dibs on anything first. So they would call dibs on these fields in the summer and play their games. I forget exactly what time, but then the other kids would have to take time slots before or after the older guys had it. Well, one day my oldest brother decided he wasn't going to go along with that, and he was going to assert his independence, and he's going to tell these guys, he's going to tell them off, and he's going to make sure they knew who he was, and he was going to abide by their rules. So him and his pals started playing on one of these fields that the big guys had already called. And that was a mistake, of course. And these are the rules of the park. Again, they're unwritten, but most of the time everybody obeys them. That's how we all got along. We endured peacefully. But Mike and his pals didn't, and so the big guys came up to him, said, "Hey, man, this is our field. What you doing here?" And Mike said some stuff, some wise guy shit that he thought he was a big guy. "Now this is our field. We're playing, and we don't care about it because this is a public field, and you can't make the rules. You can't reserve a field. There's no sign-in sheet." Well, they didn't like that, so they picked them up, took them to one of the wire trash cans that were all over the park, and dumped them head first into it, and just left them there. Of course, it was up to him to sort of roll over, to tip over and get out of the thing. But those were the unwritten rules, and that's how we learned to abide by some of these things. And if you didn't, well, you got dumped in a trash can head first. So it was a wonderful thing. I think the parents today would be horrified by this. Oh my God, they dumped little Kirsten into the or cinnamon. They dumped cinnamon into the trash can, or whatever they name kids these days. But that was normal for us. And again, we learned. And then when we got to be bigger, we would call the dibs on the fields or dibs on anything else. And then the younger kids had to abide by that. So there's a hierarchy. For the most part, we obeyed it. And when we didn't, you suffered the consequences. And that's how we learned amongst ourselves with other kids that there were rules, and that sometimes the rules had to be obeyed. This is a wonderful place in Logan's, actually just outside of Logan Square, but about a block and a half from where I live. It's called the Waterfall at Olson Rug, and there's another slide right after this one, an old postcard. This was a fantastic, lovely place. It was an acre big. If you look this up on the web, almost everybody who writes about it calls it 22 acres, but that's a lie. It's ridiculous. It's a 1 acre sized lot next to this massive carpet factory run by Mr. Olson. I forget his first name. And what he did is he opened this waterfall and park in the 1930s, mid 1930s, and because he wanted to replicate an area that he'd seen. I believe it was in northern Wisconsin, or possibly northern Michigan, but I believe it's Wisconsin. Anyway, it was this thing built out of rocks, and I'm going to go to the next slide here. And there you go. There's an actual postcard. That's what the factory, the carpet factory, looked like. It was almost 2 blocks long. I think the entire site, meaning the waterfall and the grass lawn and the factory, probably comprised 22 acres. But so this is built out of rocks, and it just, as you can see, it slants up. The waterfall's 30, maybe 40, 30, I'm going to say 30 feet. All through this thing, there are just Indian teepees, and there's one, there are flowers, just walking paths. And again, it's not very extensive, but it's a beautiful place. And there's a bridge over this waterfall right here. And if you notice that, there are no railings on that bridge. It's kind of I think it is a flagstone bridge. Well, this water is coming down, and it comes down, down, down. It forms in this pool, then it gets pumped back up. But on a hot, humid summer day, there was no place like the Olson Rug waterfall. You'd walk up the paths. It's green. Remember, we're in the midst of the city of Chicago, right in the middle of it. A lot of concrete, a lot of asphalt, really hot place. And so you'd walk up, and of course you'd be shaded by some of these trees, and you'd be taken into a different world. This is, it truly was like instantly being transported to the north woods of Wisconsin. And then you'd walk onto this bridge, and what would happen is there'd be a spray of the water from the water coming down, and a fine mist, and it would come up and just hit you, and you could stand there for several minutes and just be refreshed by this wonderful spray of water. It was absolutely fascinating. I would like to think that at some point in time they might have put some railings on that bridge. I don't see any there right now. But the other thing about this, again, flowers, trees, all kinds of but they had what we would call relics, I suppose, from the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Had a bunch of sort of molten rocks piled somewhere in a corner, and with a little sign saying these are from the Chicago Fire. And I was always, wow, let's go look at those rocks, because it's whatever they were, rocks, bricks, they had melted and formed into blobs. And Olson got them there and put them in his little park. So it was a great gem and jewel of the neighborhood. Just a beautiful place just to go to on any day in the summer, and just walk around again and be transported out of this grimy, loud city filled with people and factories and smokestacks and cars and horns and buses. And smog and soot everywhere, and just to go there and for a few minutes to live in a different world. Well, Olson Rug sold his factory, I think in 66 or 67, and to Marshall Field and Company. And Marshall Field and Company kept the waterfall going for a couple of years, but then I think in 1967 they shut it down, and then they just demolished it. They demolished this incredible gem in this working class neighborhood. That was a true, beautiful spot for working class people to go to and to get away for a little bit. It's really, you talk about sinning. My God, destroying that thing. Oh, you know what they turned it into? An asphalt parking lot. So this is you can see how green it is. It had an 800-foot long lawn. That was all lawn. It was just green. And to the side there was a decently wide sidewalk with hot dog stands and other where you could buy drinks, food, and it was just great. But now Marshall Field Company turned it into a parking lot. Yeah, real destruction. Terrible. This is Marty the bum, or certainly one of the many bums that were in the neighborhood. These were guys, we don't know really who they were. We didn't really talk with them that much, but Marty often lived underneath a commuter train station. We call it underneath the railroad tracks. He often lived in coal bins and slept in coal bins in various basements of apartment buildings. They did menial work, often shoveling coal into furnaces at apartment buildings where they, make little money, always making enough just to get themselves some liquor, usually wine, or maybe some whiskey. They were, there were a lot of them, and we always wondered, man, what are these guys' stories? Whatever happened? Why is he like that? Well, Marty we don't know how old he was, but he's always. This drawing makes these guys look too good. They were really down and out. Marty was kind of broken down, filthy, black with soot, coal, dirt, whatever. Smelled a lot. They hadn't bathed, usually in probably weeks. Sometimes smelled like piss. And again, got by doing those menial labor. Marty shuffled. He didn't really walk, he just shuffled, scraping his feet along the ground. But the good thing about the bums is that they made liquor runs for the older guys in the neighborhood. So we would go to a place called the Monument, which is in the middle of Logan Square. It's a monument to the state's state centennial of its founding. It was a giant marble column with an eagle on top of it, and a little park, and a great place. But a lot of the bums congregated there on Saturday afternoons or late Saturday afternoons, sunning themselves on the park benches. And we would go there, and that's where we would find them. And you'd make a deal with one to make a run to the liquor store. You'd give them money, and then you'd give them a tip, enough so that they could buy a pint or two of wine for themselves. The thing about it is these guys always did it. I mean, it took them long, especially Marty, because he walked so slow. He actually shuffled. But they'd come back with a cart or an armful of, beer or whiskey or schnapps or vodka, whatever it is we ordered. And it's interesting when you think about it, because the liquor store owners knew that these bums, a guy like Marty, who was frail, probably weighed 90 pounds, isn't going to be drinking six packs of Meisterbrau beer, 2 pints of wine, and a couple of pints of schnapps. He just ain't. They knew that these bums were getting this stuff for the kids, but they didn't care, because that's the way things worked back then. They had done the same thing when they were kids. They had found some bums who made liquor runs for them, and that's just how things worked. So we always got the older guys, and then me and my pals, once we got a little older, got our liquor from the bums near the Logan's Monument, we called it. This is a great thing. We did this. We had these things. These were weapons. I don't know how we found out about them, or who got the idea, or where, but they're fantastic things. So what you see here is an empty wooden spool thread. What you see here is and it's wrapped with a large rubber band. And then the rubber band, you can pull it back. This is a straw, a paper straw, and this is a wooden Strike Anywhere Ohio blue tip match. So here's what you would do. You'd wrap this thing with a rubber band, make sure it was secure so the rubber band didn't come off. You'd load a straw with a Strike Anywhere match. You'd put the straw down the hole in the spool. You pull the straw back with the rubber band, and then you'd let it go, kind of like a slingshot. The straw would fly, depending on the weather, if there was wind or anything like that, it'd fly for a while. And then when it would land, it would it would light. Crazy, crazy cool. Just so damn cool. So for a couple weeks straight, we made these. And that's just when they sold Strike Anywhere matches in stores. I don't think they sell them anymore. And we got, dozens of these things, dozens of boxes of straws, and we'd go everywhere just shooting these things. One day we got on the roof of a grocery store that fronted Fullerton Avenue. Fullerton Avenue is a busy street, or main arterial, as they say. And it had a little facade about it, and we could duck below it. It's a one-story building, and we could pop up rather, look over the facade and the roof. And we were at Hamlin, and there was a bus stop there. Actually, Avers, I think it was. Yeah, Hamlin. Anyway, there was a bus stop there, and people would go on wait for the bus there. Well, and we'd pop up, and we'd do this sometimes near dusk, so for better effect. And we'd pop up, there'd be 6 or 7 of us. We'd take our little devices, and we'd pop up, pull them back, and poof, let the straws fly down by the people at the bus stop. And then 6 or 7 of these match straws would light at their feet. They'd go, "What the hell is going on here?" And by that time we're already back down below the facade of the roof. We'd wait a few moments, reload, cautiously pop up again to make sure no one was looking around to see us, and we'd fire off another volley. 2 volleys was probably enough. Because after that they'd figure out where the things were coming from. And then we'd run. There was an apartment building next to the Jewel food store, and we would. The back porch was right next to it, and you could just sort of jump from the store roof onto the back porch, and that's what we did, and that's how we would get away. But we did these. We used these quite extensively for a couple of weeks straight. It was absolute fun. There'd be a bunch of us, and we'd line up, across the street from a brick building, like the side of an apartment building, and we just let these things fly, pretending we were firing salvos of artillery at people or at the buildings, and just imagining the destruction that we're doing. They were an absolute great thing to play with. Wonderful toy. I'll have to try to find some Strike Anywhere matches and make one of these again. And that's us playing with our toys, firing volley after volley against against the side of a brick building. And this is one of my favorite stories in the book Disturbers Row. This is Gary Kolba, a fellow disturber, just a great kid, and I always call him the wittiest disturber. He was always he was just able to do that. He was just able to confound Sister Mary Zita to no end, just by saying a couple of things. Well, anyway, and there's a great story about a spelling bee we had, which I will get into in another video. But this is Zita, and we're having art class one day, and the good kids, the kids who always want gold stars, who obey every rule. "Oh, sister, do you have another rule I can obey? Can I get a gold star, sister?" And then they turn to their, to their classmates and say, "I obeyed sister today. Aren't I a good boy? Aren't I a good girl?" They made us sick. I'm just telling you, they made us sick. Well, a lot of these good kids on this particular day were gushing to Zita about their art supplies. Now, these are 7th graders. I guess they would still do that. "Oh, sister, look at my crayons. Oh, sister, look at this, look at that. Look at my paintbrush, sister. Isn't it wonderful?" And we just got sick of this. And the illustration is a little off, but so what? That's okay. So here's what happens that day. And this is still pretty early in the school year, so Zita isn't still totally wise to us, or to Kolba, meaning wise to us, the disturbers. So at some point, Gary, sickened by this slop from these good kids, by the suck-uppedness, by their willingness to conform and obey every rule, by their inability to think for themselves and be independent. And I'm getting a little carried away here. But Gary raises his hand and decides to play the game of the good kids. He raises his hand and he goes something like, stir, stir. Now, stir was our shorthand for Zita, Sister Mary Zita. Stir, we never said sister to her. It was sort of it was disrespectful, and we planned it that way. Although we wouldn't do that to the other nuns because they'd come and clobber us, and they could really hurt you. Zita really couldn't hurt you. So Gary's sitting back in his chair. We had table-like desks. You'd stick your books in the middle, and you had a wooden chair that, would just slide back and forth and get you closer to the desk or away from it. So Gary Kolba raises his hand, goes, stir, stir. What is it, Mr. Kolba? What is it? Stir? I have a nice brush too. And stir, it's real camel hair. Zita falls for this. She kind of wobbles over to Gary and looks over his shoulder at his brush. See, stir? And then he takes his brush. We'll say this pen is my brush. He takes his brush as she's looking over his shoulder, looks back, and he goes like this underneath her nose to tickle her nose. And he keeps reporting, it's real camel hair, sister. And then he adds, and sister, I got the hair myself from a real camel in Egypt. Now she knew she had been had, and she started wailing away on Gary. It was one of the great moments, though. And we just busted out, everybody busted out laughing. We did, the Disturbers, even the good kids were laughing. It's funny. And Zita got had. But yes, sir, it's real camel hair, and he's just tickling her nose with it. Oh, this is one of the other great stories of the school year. It's sort of early in the school year. I can't remember exactly when, but the school did a fundraiser. They were just starting to do these fundraisers, which are everywhere now. And this particular one, we were supposed to sell boxes of donuts to people, neighbors, friends, relatives, whatever. Excuse me. You'd go out a couple of weeks prior to this and take the orders for the donuts. So you'd have pre-orders. People would give you their money. I think they cost $1 a piece. Who knows? Back then, maybe 50 cents for a box of a dozen donuts. But the Disturbers, we did a pretty good job and sold a lot of them. And then the morning, a big truck comes with these boxes of donuts, and we've got shopping bags, which we've gotten from home because we've been told to bring shopping bags because the donuts are coming today, tomorrow, and you'll take them home, then you'll deliver them to your customers who have already paid you for the donuts. Well, again, the Disturbers, we actually sold a decent amount of these things, actually quite a bit. So we got the idea. We're in the back row, remember, there's 5 of us. We've got these table-like desks and chairs. So what we do is we put all of our desks together so there's no gap in between the tops. And then we start taking all of our donuts, and it came in like, size of a shoebox, rectangular. And we started putting them across the desks, and we built them level after level after level. And in a short while, we had what was called the Great Wall of Doughnuts. Really, really wonderful stuff. The Great Wall of Doughnuts. Maybe 5, 6, 7 boxes high, I can't remember. But it was high enough so that we could crouch down and Zita couldn't see us. So, at some point she looks up and sees this wall of donut boxes. And, she's going to get pissed and whatever. So we spent the entire morning that day, behind our wall of donuts, out of Zita's sight. And we're doing things like throwing paper airplanes, coming up, sticking our heads above the wall, shooting spitballs through pen tubes. at the good kids, uh, everything, throwing wads of paper. It was the funniest thing for us because Zeta couldn't see us. And for whatever reason, she didn't come back that day and try to clobber us. Who knows? Maybe she just gave up. But it was a great, great episode, a memory that we all have hiding behind the Great Wall of Doughnuts. Of course, just before the noon bell was to ring, we took the wall down. We put all of our donuts in our shopping bags, and took them home. And that afternoon after school, we would have delivered them to our customers. But for a morning, for a couple of hours, on one morning, we hid behind our wall of donuts, and there wasn't a damn thing Sister Mary Zeta could do. Well, I hope you enjoyed these. I really get a kick out of this stuff. These are great stories. I hope you buy Disturber's Rug. Remember, you can get it at Amazon and other online retailers. If you like this stuff, please subscribe to the channel. Leave some comments. I've also got a Facebook page called Disturber's Row. And you can also go to my website, which is disturbersrow.com. And you can see my other books there as well. The I Got Stinky Feet series, which is hilarious. And I'll do videos about that as well. It's just a really funny comic. Volume 1 and Volume 2 comic novel. Two goofballs on a cross-country motorcycle trip. Actually, me and Dave, we actually did this. So, again, be happy out there, and thank you for watching.